In this video, we will explore teachings of Socrates and how they can inspire and enlighten us today. Socrates was born in Athens around 470 BC. He lived during a time of great cultural and political turmoil in Greece. The Athenian democracy was challenged by wars, revolutions, and corruption. Socrates witnessed the rise and fall of many leaders and regimes, and he was deeply concerned about the moral and intellectual state of his society. He believed that the root of the problem was the lack of wisdom and virtue among the people, especially the elites. He decided to dedicate his life to the pursuit of truth and goodness, and to help others do the same. Socrates did not write any books or treatises, but his ideas were passed down by his students, especially Plato and Xenophon. He did not have a school or a system of thought. He was simply a man who loved to ask questions and to engage in dialogue with anyone who was willing to talk to him. He approached politicians, poets, artisans, soldiers, and even slaves. He asked them about their views on various topics, such as justice, beauty, courage, piety, and love. Then, he asked them to explain why they thought that way and to think about why they believed what they did. He also showed them where their ideas didn't make sense or didn't match up with what most people thought or experienced in everyday life. He did not do this to mock or humiliate them, but to help them discover the truth and improve themselves. This way of questioning things is known as the Socratic Method. It is a powerful tool for learning and teaching, as it stimulates critical thinking and fosters dialogue and understanding. One of the most famous examples of the Socratic Method comes from a dialogue that Socrates had with a young man named Euthyphro. Euthyphro was a religious expert who claimed to know what piety is. Socrates asked him to define piety, and Euthyphro said that piety is doing what the gods love. Socrates then asked him, "Do the gods love something because it is pious, or is it pious because the gods love it?" This question put Euthyphro in a dilemma. If he said that the gods love something because it is pious, then he would have to admit that there is a higher standard of piety than the gods will. If he said something is pious because the gods love it, he'd suggest piety is arbitrary and could change based on the gods' preferences. Either way, Euthyphro's definition of piety would be inadequate and problematic. Through this series of questions, Socrates showed Euthyphro that he did not really understand what piety is, and that he needed to think more deeply and carefully about it. Socrates applied his questioning attitude to many other topics and domains of human life. He questioned the sources and standards of knowledge and wisdom. He questioned himself and his own convictions and actions. He believed that by questioning oneself and others, one could achieve a higher level of wisdom and virtue, and become a better person and a happier person. He also believed that by questioning the authorities and the traditions of his society, one could expose the corruption and injustice that plagued it, and promote the reform and progress of it. He saw philosophy as a way of life, and he viewed questioning as a duty. His famous words, "An unexamined life is not worth living," serve as a reminder of the importance of critical self-reflection and intellectual curiosity. Socrates' questioning attitude teaches us to seek the truth through dialogue and reasoning. It also teaches us to be humble and curious, and to admit our ignorance and learn from others. It challenges us to examine our own beliefs and values, and to improve our character and conduct. It also challenges us to question the status quo and the norms of our society, and to strive for a better and more just world. Socrates was not only a great questioner, but also a great teacher. He did not impose his views or doctrines on his students, but rather encouraged them to think for themselves and to find their own answers. He did not treat them as passive recipients or followers, but rather as active participants and partners. He inspired them to love wisdom and to pursue it with passion and courage. Socrates was not only a great teacher, but also a great example. He lived according to his principles and values, and he did not compromise them for anything. He was courageous and honest, and he spoke his mind without fear or favor. He was humble and modest, and he did not seek any wealth or fame. He was loyal to his friends, but he did not flatter them or spare them from his criticism. He was cheerful and optimistic, and he did not complain or despair. He was wise and virtuous, and he did not harm or wrong anyone. Socrates faced many hardships and challenges in his life, but he did not let them affect his happiness or integrity. He was often ridiculed and rejected by his fellow citizens, who did not appreciate or understand his philosophy. He was often accused and attacked by his enemies, who feared and hated his influence. He was eventually put on trial and condemned to death by a jury of his peers, who found him guilty of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. He had the chance to escape from prison with the help of his friends, but he refused to do so. He chose to obey the law and accept his fate, even though he knew it was unjust and wrong. He drank the poison, hemlock, while conversing with his friends about the immortality of the soul. He died as he lived, with dignity and grace. Socrates' ethical values are relevant and influential for us today because they teach us to be brave and principled and to stand up for what we believe in. They show us that a good person can never be harmed by anything because his virtue and wisdom are his greatest assets and protections. They also show us that death is not something to be feared or avoided, but rather something to be faced and embraced as a natural and inevitable part of life. Socrates was a remarkable man who left a lasting mark on the world.